I was born Margaret Rosemary Noel, Noel, because my ancestors were Huguenots. I've got a French name. But I was born very late on to my father, who was in the First and Second World Wars. His name was James Noel, and we're very proud of him because he fought in both conflicts and was very brave. Oh, I'm not going to cry. No, I'm not going to cry.
Great.
No, I'm not going to cry. He wasn't going to go into the army at all. And then, of course, the First World War was declared, and he thought, well, all my friends are joining up. I don't want to be the only one not doing my little bit for England, so I'll join. They walked him down the road to a building, with big gates, and on the gates it said, boilers, danger, explosions, keep out. And they went through this gate, and my father said he stopped in his tracks, and he said, what the devil's that? And they said, well, we call it a tank. And that was his very, very first introduction to tanks. One day they were told that they had to take a bridge that was holding up their movement forward, and there was a chemical works on the other side that was very helpful to the German people, and they were told they had to put this chemical works out of action. But the Germans realised that this bridge was very important, and so they had 2 machine gun posts on either side of the river, on the other side of the river, centred on the bridge. And they were told, well, that's the thing, boys. You've got to get across the bridge, and then we can get onto the chemical works. So he got into the tank with the lieutenant, because they always had to have an officer in the tank, and there was a lieutenant doing nothing, so they put him in, and off they went. And they hadn't got very far. They hadn't reached the bridge when the officer was wounded. So my father turned around the tank. He was the driver. He turned around the tank and he brought it back to the lines, and he offloaded the lieutenant. And they said, well, you can't go on, Jimmy, because we haven't got any more lieutenants or officers to go with you. And my father said, look, we need this bridge, don't we? You told me this is important. You need it. I'm going to go. So without any orders, he turned the tank around and off they went. And as I say, on the other side of the river, there were these 2 emplacements of Germans centred on the thing, and off he went in his tank. And he was a little bit worried. I think it was his very, very first action, his very first encounter with Germans, but off he went. And they got across the bridge, and they put the 2 machine gun posts out of action, and he took 50 prisoners, and they were taken back. So for that he received the Médaille Militaire, and he was recommended for the VC. Well, it went to his CO, and his CO said, I'm definitely putting you in for a VC, Jimmy, and it went through different sections all the way up, right up to the War Office. And the War Office said, now what's all this? Yes, Sergeant Noel, very brave action, dedicated and all that sort of thing. But we can't give him the VC because we do have a rule that the first VC should go to an officer, unless he's killed, of course. He could get it posthumously, but if he happens to survive it, then... so we'll give him the next one down, the next decoration down, which was the DCM. He talked to my brother, who was also a soldier, about his action. He didn't think it was the sort of thing a little girl should hear about. I was a little girl in those days. I would sometimes go into a room and he'd be talking to my brother, and he would break off as I walked in, and the conversation would finish. He wasn't so much fighting in the Second World War as he was on the supply trucks. And when our tanks were out facing Rommel, he would go out at night and take the munitions. Tobruk was beginning to get rather a hot spot because Rommel was rather keen to have Tobruk. And just before the actual final Battle of Tobruk, he was sent home. And as I say, he was on the troop ship leaving Tobruk, coming home, when he heard that Tobruk had fallen. And then, of course, he realised that had he still been there, he would either have been a prisoner of war or he would have been killed. So we were very grateful to have him home. He was given 2 weeks leave when he got home, so he had his 2 weeks. And then he said, I must go up to the War Office in London and see what they want, where they want to send me. He walked in and they said, we've been looking through your record. You got a pasting in the first time around, and you've done quite a lot in the second. We don't really think, we think you've done your bit now. So we've got another suggestion that we'd like to put to you. If you go round to all the places in England where the troops are being trained in tank warfare, and you can tell them what it was like, and they will listen to you because you know what you're talking about. It isn't all out of a textbook. You've done it, and you know what it's like, and you've been under fire. You've got to, they will pay much more attention to you than they would from somebody else reading it from a textbook. So you can talk from it. So my father said, well, fair enough. He was getting on a bit then anyway, and so that was how he ended the war. He was one of 6, and there wasn't much money in the family, and I think he thought it was an adventure, because young men didn't they? And he hadn't had much adventure in his life. He had a very poor upbringing, and I think he was quite excited at the beginning, and I think the reality must have been really rather horrible, because we've heard about what the conditions were like in the early tanks. We used to take him to see people who living in London and living in the Midlands. We used to take him we had a car, took him around to meet up with his fellow, and they would all say to me when I met them, your father's a very brave man. I hope you understand your father's a very brave man. And I would say, oh yes, I do know. Yes, we're very proud of Daddy, yes. They all used to say that to me when I used to meet up with them. That was the first thing they said to me, your father's a very brave man. So obviously we were very proud of him. I would have liked to say, were you frightened? That was never a question that I ever thought to ask him. He never talked about fear as such. As I say, he just said, I just hope that what we have done means that you will never have to live through a war. He would have been thrilled. He would have been absolutely thrilled. The fact that they were still recognised as something that was really important. He would have been really excited. He would have wanted to have been part of it. He would have wanted to have been here and say, yes, that was the one that I commanded. I think that would have excited him very much. He would have been volunteering for anything that you'd have going here. He would have loved it. He really liked. I think they held a very special place in his heart, the Tank Corps, and he did. He always called it the Tank Corps, not the Tank Regiment, not the Royal Tank Regiment. It was always the Tank Corps. The Tank Regiment was his life, the best part of his life, and I'm very grateful to them for that.